What's up, everybody? Pete from the basement here at Comic-Con. We're here with Mike Sizemore, the author of John Carpenter's Tales of Science Fiction, Vortex. I have compared this to basically like a Tales from the Crypt version of Aliens. How did you come up with this one?
It was John Carpenter and his wife and publishing partner Sandy who actually came up with the initial idea. So we'd been working together on some TV and film stuff, and we were just throwing ideas around, and this came to me as kind of 3 pages, very broad stroke story about a mining colony in space. Some weird stuff happens. One guy kind of gets out of his depth, starts finding out that there's even more weird stuff going on, and they wanted me to then develop it into what became kind of like almost 300 pages of kind of sci-fi horror.
This was the longest running series from the Tales of Science Fiction so far. This went for a total of 8 issues. Now, one of my absolute favorite horror movies was Event Horizon, and between all of the creatures running around in here, and no spoilers or anything, but where did you draw the rest of your inspiration for the story and the monsters, and like how did you come up with those?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Event Horizon, because that's kind of been in the back of my mind. That and Disney's Black Hole, weirdly enough, which is like the sister movie to Event Horizon, weirdly. But as you said, just before this came out, there was a 3-issue run of a story called Vault, which was probably even more a little Event Horizon-y. It was a spaceship in the middle of nowhere, stranded. And then the other thing was to kind of weirdly steer it away from a lot of John's movies, because we didn't want to just do the thing in space, which was like the obvious one to do. But we managed to layer some elements in there, so there's a little bit of a siege going on. You know, you go back to Assault on Precinct 13 or even Ghost of Mars, you kind of get that kind of... I did
get a lot of Ghost of Mars in there.
It's tricky not to. You've got miners, you're in space, some bad stuff happening. But we also did some kind of little Easter eggs so that it kind of ties in with Dark Star and stuff like that. So we went all over the place in John's film history, but without it being obvious and in your face. We wanted to get that feel that John does so well in the films, but without it just being a kind of rip-off of what you've already seen before.
You wanted the fans who were the true fans of his work to know, like, oh wait, I recognize what you did there.
Yeah. I mean, we wanted people to pick it up and also just want to read it for 8 issues. That's a long run, for an indie comic book. There's so many books out there at the moment, and we knew that 8 was a big ask. But the great thing about working with John and Sandy is they just gave me the room to kind of like tie up all the loose ends and get the story written. So when we planned it and it just kept getting bigger and bigger, this just felt like the right length. And this was before we even considered putting it out in a trade paperback. We just didn't know if people would want it. And then, a year or so later, here we are. It's... I saw this for the first time today, and I can't believe how thick it is. I'm used to the single issues. It's weird seeing it all in one volume.
I want to draw on 2 important things that you said. Sure. And the first was, did you guys notice he said we were doing this before we considered a trade paperback? And that's such a relief in this modern comics industry where a lot of the bigger companies are writing stories geared toward making people buy the trade paperbacks and things, whereas you're writing the story for the sake of the story. And so it became 8 issues. It wasn't forced to be 8 issues. It wasn't planned that way. This is just where the story naturally, organically flowed to.
Well, I think what helps with that is I'm a huge fan of John Carpenter anyway, before we started working together. So the kind of biggest green light for me is when I start giving pages to John and the feedback comes back and he says, yeah, I'm really enjoying this. Let's keep going. Because there were a few instances in the story where I thought, well, if he really hates this issue, we can kind of pull the plug. I knew there were a few ways to end it early if I needed to, But again, it was just no, have as much rope as you need, and let's get to the end.
As long as the guy is still liking it, you can be like a kid in a candy store, like, oh man, I'm pleasing the original dude.
No, well, that's it. You're kind of like playing in his world, so yeah.
It's got to be very complimenting when he turns around and says, no, this is great, keep going with it.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. I mean, the first time I ever met John, I was invited up to the house to have some cake, and John Carpenter's sitting opposite me offering me a slice of cake. It's like the master of horror giving me cake. It was just crazy.
That seems very surreal.
It's just nuts. I remember very, very little about that first meeting because my mind was just swirling. But
the other thing I want to draw on is like you said, this is an indie company and not a lot of people know it, but when they see even just the cover, and the biggest thing I find with some indie companies is the cover will be beautiful, and then you look through the inside and it's like, what happened? But the artwork remains consistently beautiful and dark in tone, and it's just it draws you right in to the story, and that I think is another thing that's important in this series.
Well, it sets a high bar because we got Tim Bradstreet doing the covers. I mean, he's just top of his game.
Yeah, he always has been since Punisher days.
Now, I feel lucky because I'm just the writer, so I get to think all this crap up and then I just pass it on and say, make this look cool. But Dave Kennedy, our artist on this, I've known him forever, and we've done some indie stuff back in the UK before, but this was a big step up for him as well. We just done little short runs on Comicology, just nothing compared to this, and we were trying to work out how quickly we needed to get stuff to the letterers and then to the printer, and what the kind of turnaround would be. And Dave agreed that he could probably do a page a day, and some of these pages are crazy.
So detailed.
And, if you read my scripts aren't that detailed. It's just Dave feels the need that if he's going to draw the interior of a spaceship, he needs to know, well, okay, the pilot's here, so she's going to reach up here. What does this panel do? And how does it work in relation to what's down here? And I'll just write, Dave, just put her in a spaceship. She's flying the damn thing. She needs a stick or a wheel, I don't know. And he'll design an entire spaceship. He'll build it in 3D. And then when we see it later, he'll just be able to spin that around and put it wherever. So he kind of stepped up. I mean, I was seeing the art come in that went from very, very rough thumbnails where I was like, yeah, it kind of looks what was in my head, to this looks nothing like what was in my head. This is so much better. And that's just really nice when the art starts coming in, and I feel kind of blown away by it. I know it's going to resonate when the fans get a hold of it.
So now, you mentioned a moment ago before we started filming, they have another 3 of your stories on the hook?
Yeah. So this stuff comes to me and I kind of throw it back to them to see if it's in the wheelhouse. So the thing that Dave, the artist, and I did for John and Sandy first was for the Tales for Halloween Night Volume 2. So we did a little weird Western thing. I think it was like 8 or 9 pages, and it was mostly to show off Dave's talent for sequential art, but they really liked it and asked for more. So this stuff's kind of been piling up behind Vortex because I can write faster than Dave can draw. So he's in Japan at the moment, just starting on another book for me, and then the next thing we'll be doing are the Tales for a Halloween Night. So we should have 2 or 3 more of those coming out in the next couple of issues.
Oh, fantastic. I've actually never read Tales of Halloween Night, so I think what I'm going to do is pick one of those up now, have you sign it for me, and then we're going to review it and look for it on a future episode of The Basement. Mike, thanks for being on the program.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much.
See you next time.